This video is part of the Devil May Cry retrospective series, so if you want to hear about my thoughts on the previous games, be sure to check them out either in the card or in the description below. If you just want to hear about my thoughts on Devil May Cry 4, then sit back and enjoy. While Capcom's 2D fighting games were at a decline during the first half of the 2000s, they were still hitting strong with the likes of Resident Evil, as well as giving birth to series like Omnimusa and Monster Hunter, with the latter becoming a worldwide juggernaut. One of the games that proved to be a staple during this generation was Devil May Cry, as while the second game was a critical failure, the sales were good, with 1 and 3 becoming all-time classics. The series protagonist Dante was playable in the PlayStation ports of the Beautiful Joe games, appeared as a boss in Shin Megami Tensei 3, while getting a lot of side materials with various mangas, light novels, and an anime by Madhouse Studios, which I loved when I saw it for the first time. After playing Devil May Cry 3 around 20 years ago, I became a massive fan of the series, and going out of my way playing the prior games. The HD generation was coming soon, so by E3 2005, Devil May Cry 4 was teased being soon for the upcoming PlayStation 3, but it was decided later on that it was also coming to Windows PC, and for the first time in the series, appearing on a non-Sony home console, the Xbox 360. Around 2006 or so, my family got an Xbox, which was mainly used by my brothers playing the likes of Gears of War and Halo 3. For me, I was waiting for the likes of Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts, Sonic Unleashed, and Devil May Cry 4. The 360 came out first and therefore was cheaper to get than the sunny new PlayStation 3, which I didn't get until a bit later. The team decided to switch out the main hero Dante with a brand new character Nero, as according to the producer Hiroyuki Kobayashi, the team felt that Dante grew title by title, and by DMC3 had reached this completion stage, and wanted a new start for the series with a new character for a wider audience to jump into. With a lot of changes such as a new character and building for 2 brand new consoles for the game, one of them being the PlayStation 3, known for being a nightmare to work with during its early years, proved to be a stressful experience for the team. In fact, series writer Bingo Morihashi left Capcom during development, becoming a freelance writer due to communication issues, though thankfully stuck with finishing the project. Introducing a brand new character to take the leading role was certainly a gamble, especially considering Dante was beloved by so many people for both a gameplay and character standpoint. Even the developers were aware of Dante's fame and was worried about the reception of the brand new character Nero. I mean, yet what happened with Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2 when that came out? So Raiden has gotten the love he deserves now, but on a first base reaction, I can see why people would have been upset seeing a character you loved for years being swapped by a brand new guy who isn't even as cool as Solid Snake. I think because the team worried about taking this series into that direction, they wanted to at least let you play as Dante to slowly ease you into the transition. Nero wasn't received as badly as Raiden, probably because unlike Raiden, he was revealed before the game was released. He had his fans, but I remember him being pretty divisive back when the game first came out from friends at the time and people online. I thought he was alright, but nowhere near as cool as Dante, plus he looked too similar to his predecessor. Still, I was excited to get my hands on it and got it around the same time it came out. I don't own this game physically anymore. In fact, out of any game I bought, this was the one I kept trading back and forth, whether that was on the Xbox or the PlayStation. But I now do own the special edition on Steam, which includes new features such as additional playable characters, costumes, better visuals, additional content, and Japanese dub? Wait, what? Yeah, despite being a Japanese-made series, the games didn't get any Japanese voices until this version of the game. I had to double check that because I couldn't believe it. All the Japanese voice actors in the Madhouse anime and other source material came back to reprise their roles here and in future titles, while Nero was voiced by Keito Ishikawa, who you may know for characters like Gunvolt and Dimitri from Fireman Three Houses, or if you're an anime fan, voices Tenya from My Hero Academia and Zenas from One Punch Man. Speaking of the voice actors, the English actors for Dante, Lady and Virgil reprised their roles for 4 and still sound as good as they did there. The new guys are pretty good too, with the main highlight being Johnny Yong Bosch, voicing our hero Nero, someone who's pretty famous in the voice acting scene, with my favourite role of his being Vaster Stampede from Trigon. If you are a Power Rangers fan, then you may recognise him as the second Black Ranger in Mighty Morphin. Probably a coincidence, but he is the third guy in the franchise that also had some involvement in the Power Rangers series, with Ruben Yangan being a stuntman for Galaxy and Lightspeed Rescue, as well as Daniel Southworth, who voiced the Quantum Ranger in Time Force. Johnny Yong Bosch really sells the performance, making Nero feel like a teenage rebel who cares about the people he loves. His screams are at the epsilon of tears, being the same level as Salt's from Xenoblade Chronicles. You can tell he's in love with the love interest of the name Kyrie by the way he calls out her name every so often. As much as I love his performance as Nero, it felt weird how they cast him to play as Dante in that god-awful Netflix show. Anyway, side tangent aside, how about we get into the synopsis, yeah? The game starts out in the city of Fortuna, a place where a group worship the legendary Dark Knight Sparta. Our hero, Nero, is part of the Order of the Sword, a group of religious soldiers who vanquish demons from the mortal realm. In the opening scene, we see our hero rushing towards the Fortuna church, so he doesn't miss Kyrie's performance while slaying demons in his way. He manages to make it in time before her song ends. While in the middle of a boring hymn from the old Bishop Sanctus, our hero from the previous game, Dante, comes crashing down from the ceiling and immediately puts a bird into the old geezer, causing chaos in the church. The knights are no match for him, with only our protagonist having any luck on dealing some hits. Dante shooting the old dude was quite a sight, and the way it was choreographed made it seem like Dante turned to the dark side. Did he turn bad? Or was he possessed? Well, in no time flat, it's pretty obvious that Dante isn't a bad dude. The church is actually evil. Bum bum bum. I imagine people who knew to the series at the time had no idea what was going on, or maybe who this Dante chap is. He flees from the scene, and Nero is ordered by his commandant officer and Kyrie's brother, Credo, to track him down, which leads him into finding out the Order of the Sword's true motives. The plot says elements were free, starring a young brass demon hunter, the themes of family and humanity, and a magical item that the villains want, but I found a lot of it to be executed better in the previous game. It felt like pieces of the story were missing, probably due to the vast development. It felt like some conflicts were either skipped or not focused enough on, like our protagonist worrying that he might be a monster. That's due to not much happening in the second half of the game, which involved a playable character that switched from Nero to Dante, and most of his missions are just repeating the same environment and bosses, but backwards. We do find out why Dante's here later on, but it would have been nice what he was up to while we were playing as Nero, maybe even having to play out those events instead of what we got. Either that or have the entire campaign focus on Nero and have Dante playable after the main campaign is completed, though it could have led to some veterans being upset. It led to Nero not having enough screen time to go into his devil arm, his relationship with the Order of the Sword, his mentor Credo, or even anything from the Order in general, with other source materials picking up the slack. In fact, the main villain is generic compared to the other games, though still beats DMC2's antagonist out of the water. While I'm used to the third or reason being an evil trope, countless times now, I thought it was pretty cool back in 2008. The story is serviceable at the very least, as the characters are a joy to watch. Dante is just as charismatic as he was before, with a sprinkle of extra camp. The way he interacts with the bosses are hilarious, including one of my favourite scenes in the entire franchise. He does take a step back from the spotlight, taking the role of the experienced, relaxed mentor figure, a trait he will carry on in the next mainline title. While I think Nero should have been the main focus, I feel what we got at least in this game is still a great character. He's similar to his predecessor when it comes to Yutz, but he stands out as his own individual, being a tad more serious, who's more prone to anger. I know some people criticize Kyrie's role as a damsel in distress who seems more of a plot device, which I get, but I don't think that's always a bad thing. They seem to have a good chemistry with one another, with what screen time they have, and the way the story is directed makes their love more believable, therefore making me care what happens to them in the story. It's a different approach on tackling family matters, as instead of being about blood relatives, all about the families found. Nero is just as charismatic as his predecessor, talking smack to his enemies, and his personality is highlighted by the way he fights and taunts he can perform. While Dante is a lot more flashy with his moves, Nero is a lot more aggressive, attacking with big swings, the way his sword, the Red Queen, roars like a motorcycle engine, and the way he pummels his opponent with his devil arm. He's only equipped with 2 weapons, one melee and one ranged weapon, as he was designed to be more beginner friendly. His signature ability is his devil arm, which can be used to grab, counter, pull, or even launch himself towards his enemies. Pulling yourself towards your opponents or pulling your opponents into you makes it easier to get into the offensive. What he lacks in quantity, he certainly makes up in quality. Even though he was designed with newcomers in mind, he has a lot of depth that made me want to get good at the game. His Devil Buster move grabs an enemy and throws them, and depending on the enemy will pull off a different move from repeatedly banging them to the ground, using the god as a bazooka, or pulling off Zangief's Atomic Buster. One of my favourites is when he grabs the White Knights and uses their lances against them and just charges to the nearest wall. Hearing the engine sound when he pulls off this move is beautiful. Sound design goes a long way of making combat feel so satisfying. He can also do the same to bosses too, with their own unique animations that do a lot of damage when you pull it off. It felt so good grabbing the first proper boss of the game with the Buster and launching this behemoth into the air. He's not invincible when he performs these moves, so don't think these can be spammed, still inheriting the series' motto of rewarding the player by understanding the mechanics. It's flashy without feeling like a cutscene. He feels like a grab it in a fighting game, put it into a hack and slash game. By default, he can charge up the sword up to 3 times, which adds a fire effect to his weapon and can unlock additional moves, but that slows down the flow of combat. I would sometimes charge it out of battle, so I can use it on the next enemy, but the developers knew this as when pressing the charge button at the right time during an attack can fill up the gauge instantly and can be used for the next attack. I still need to get the timing down, but it's so bloody good when you do, able to do tons of damage onto the bosses. While I do need to practice, I feel the timing is valid, making sure you aren't just battle massing and encourages you to get into the rhythm. There are so many other cool tricks, the enemy hops, as well as Devil Trigger that can launch demons into the air upon activation. His Devil Trigger is a bit different than Dante's, as instead of transforming, Nero has a spectre behind him which can deal more powerful variations of the grab moves and can fire blades as projectiles that deal a lot of damage, slightly similar to Virgil's summon swords from DMC3 Special Edition. While I prefer the Son of Sparta as a character, Nero is one of my favourite hack and slash characters to play as. He is beginner friendly that a newcomer to the genre could possibly get a hand of, but he has a lot of depth that a dedicated action gamer would have a lot of fun to experiment with. I think from a combat perspective, the team did a bloody good job introducing him into the series. Dante makes up for the second half of the game, who despite people claiming he was added at the last minute, was always planned to appear. Besides the doppelganger and Quicksilver styles, all of his other fighting styles were brought back from the previous game and was the first time you can switch them on the fly, plus with the ability to switch all of his weapons on the fly can lead into some creative yet overwhelming gameplay. Unlike in 3, Dante doesn't need to level these styles up, as they are unlike any other ability in his game, which is in the socks, and this time you aren't using the red orbs. Devil May Cry 4 is the first and only time where unlocking new abilities is done by spending Proud Souls, which are rewarded after the end of each mission. You gain more Proud Souls by how well you do in missions, which is calculated by how many orbs you have collected, how long it took you to beat the mission, your stylish rank, and if you used any items like holy water or gold orbs. Red orbs are just now tied to purchasing items in the store. On one hand, it makes getting upgrades a bit easier, especially since Proud Souls can be transferred to the next character. But on the other hand, I prefer the way the older titles did it, where you had to decide if you want to buy more health for the next mission or save up for an upgrade. It's not like you will be running low on orbs, as they are scattered everywhere throughout the game, so buying health is easier to do. You still have to think which ability to get as the cost of each ability increases after each purchase, but if you want a different one you can always sell an old ability back. I never did this as I managed to get most of the ones I wanted, at least on a second playthrough. Besides a couple of weapons and one more fighting style, most of Dante's abilities can be unlocked as soon as the halfway point, which can be a bit much for a newbie, but at least on the regular one you don't have to worry to use all of his arsenal and just stick to the ones you like. My favourites to use are Swordmaster and Royal Guard. The amount of weapons Dante gets is much shorter, only having 3 melee weapons and 3 guns, but now you can switch all of his kit on the go, making experimenting a lot easier. 2 of his melee weapons are the usual Rebellion and Gauntlets, but his new one, Lucifer, is interesting, taking the form of a projectile sword that can be detonated at any time. Back in 2008, I never really liked this weapon due to its unorthodox playstyle, but back then, I was an action game amateur, and now I find it to be pretty fun. Sadly, on the first playthrough, you don't have a lot of time to use Lucifer due to how late you get it, but I feel this series encourages replayability. The usual dual-wielding pistols and shotgun are back, but the third gun you unlock, Pandora, is quite fascinating. Pandora is a briefcase that, according to the gallery mode, is 666 guns into one. Pretty metal, but in actuality is far less. Pandora can turn into a rocket launcher, a Gatling gun, a laser, and even a mobile vehicle that fires a lot of rockets if you upgrade Gunslinger. It's the only weapon of his that has a gauge, where once it fills up, unlocks its ultimate attack. The weapons are a lot of fun, but besides Pandora and Lucifer, the weapons you get can be used in the other games, and compared to 3, aren't as diverse. Some people say Dante wasn't designed with these enemies in mind, and I say that's a load of fooey. A couple of enemies that Frost were in the first game, and ones that Faust and Mephisto behave similar to the similar enemies in the first game. Most of the enemies can be easily dealt with if you know what to do. I think what made some people come to that conclusion is that Nero can grab enemies when their guard is down, which can do a lot of damage, while Dante has to get in closer, plus with the number of tools you have at your disposal can be daunting to fit out their weakness. He can easily dodge their attack, or even get the jump on them with Trickster, parry with Royal Guard, and can deal with the Faust enemies with the Gunslinger style. Honestly, so far, these are my favourite set of enemies in the franchise, being quite diverse as well as aggressive. The only enemies I dislike are these parasites that latch onto other foes, which can hit you even if they're vulnerable on the ground or grabbed and the bits. Seriously, these guys are immune to all melee weapons, and even Nero's Buster, while not covered in electricity, are only vulnerable if you do enough damage to them with a long-range weapon, which can take a while to deal with, or if you successfully parry with Dante's Royal Guard, so most of the time, especially if you haven't mastered parrying, will take a while to deal with these freaks. They deal a lot of damage too, and can even do a kamikaze attack. It's so annoying. This is also a thing in every DMC game, but I like that instead of just giving enemies more health on harder difficulties, they put more stronger enemies earlier before they were first introduced on the default difficulty. The bosses for the most part are good, but since this is a Capcom game, they decided to repeat them. You only fight them once as Dante, but with Nero you must fight them twice, and during a harder difficulty you may encounter the same boss for a third time during the first dice mission. It's not like in the first game where the terrain is different, it's the same bosses again in the same environments. The dice board game is reused twice, and the second time is just a boss rush with the majority of bosses you fought, and it was frustrating how it works as the dice, at least from face value, seems to be random. Those missions can either end very quickly or take forever. I think the biggest problem with DMC4 is the pacing, and its reused bosses, and that's due to the rush development. However, despite its noticeable flaw, it didn't put me off, especially considering you are just experiencing these levels with 2 unique characters, so you are interacting with the environments and enemies differently. If they had a longer development cycle, or just start with one character, then maybe there would be a lot more level variety, but that's not what we got. Maybe if they had Dante as an optional separate campaign, then maybe the criticism would have softened, but then you might get journalists complaining about the game's length. I hate now with every new playthrough, you are forced to do the tutorial level, and it's worse in the special edition with the multiple characters, even if you are playing on a higher difficulty. While the original version only had 2 playable characters, the special edition included 3 more, which are Virgil, Triss, and the first and sadly only time in the franchise, Yadi. Yadi and Triss both share a campaign together, but don't have much story content. Triss is so much fun. Like in DMC2, she wields the Sparta sword, which she uses classic moves like Stinger and High Time, while using it as a tool to either trap or pull enemies towards her. Triss has a variety of lightning attacks, which she can use close up or to stun enemies. Dude, the combination between using Sparta and her electric powers are a total blast. Like, how is he able to fight in those tight leather jeans? She can even do Captain Torador.
Captain, これだ!
I have to really think about it, but she might be my favourite character to play in this game. No, if you are playing it on PC, make sure to check your settings because I noticed a couple of frame drops when things got too busy with her, most likely due to the electric particle effects. Up next, we have Yadi, who is a total walking arsenal. While she can hit up close, her playstyle is either shooting or blowing up demons from a distance. Unlike the other characters who have devil triggers, she just has a super move where she throws multiple grenades that covers a large radius, doing a crazy amount of damage. Yadi can charge her weapons up to 3 levels, with the highest level doing the most damage. Her pistols charge up the fastest but are the weakest, the shotgun being in the middle, and her signature weapon, the Kina N, being the slowest but it's the strongest, killing most enemies at maximum level. She is the slowest out of the bunch but can throw enemies from a distance. Unlike DMC2, enemies are more aggressive, so her guns don't feel overpowered. Sad that these two aren't playable in Devil May Cry 5. Finally, what would be a special edition without Virgil? Unlike everyone else, he has his own story, but then again, it's hardly anything, only having 1 or 2 scenes, which don't amount to much. He's mostly the same as he was in the previous game, but has gained new additions. And the idea from the DMC reboot, which came out a few years before the special edition, was using a summon sword to teleport to the enemy embedded with a sword. He also has a separate meter called concentration, where he would get stronger when filled up, powering up moves like Judgment Cut. Both him and Yadi don't have much issue with Blitz, thanks to the wide range of long-range attacks. He's incredibly busted, able to kill enemies with not much effort. Even on hard mode, I didn't have much trouble. If you want a power trip, play Virgil, but he does make the game easy. Even on Heaven or Hell mode, where everyone including you and the bosses dies in one hit, was a cakewalk with him, as I could just use summon swords to act as a shield or fire them at the enemies. If you play Devil May Cry 4, who was your favourite character to play as? For me, it's either Nero or Triss. Devil May Cry 4 is a great game that's even better with Special Edition's new content, worth coming back to. Special Edition even included a mode from the original PC version where they just dumped a swarm of enemies to fight. It's chaotic. I do think you shouldn't play all of these characters back to back, especially since the levels are all the same. Virgil even says both Nero's and Dante's levels, but I do at least recommend spacing these playthroughs out to try all of them. If you do, you can just skip the cutscenes. If you don't want to repeat the same campaigns over and over again, you can always try out Bloody Paris to get a feel for each character. From a gameplay standpoint, Nero is an amazing introduction for action fans. However, he doesn't live up to the same caliber as Dante. I do think it was an incredibly hard chance for him, as Dante had a legacy behind him. I do think the staff knew this too, considering both characters are playable. Still, Nero did turn out to be beloved, with him getting another chance many years later, and thankfully we live in a reality when we did get a Devil May Cry 5. I think so far in this retrospective, this might be the best purely on a combat level. In general, this might be one of the best combat systems in any game, and the easiest to get into, thanks to a more manageable default difficulty. In terms of the overall package, then 3 is my favourite so far. If you want something with loads of content you can keep coming back to, then I highly recommend Devil May Cry 4.